Hello, and welcome to part 1 of my tutorial series for creating an original custom track from scratch for Crash Team Racing. This will be the first tutorial I've ever made for anything, ever, so excuse the quality. In this series, I'll be building a basic custom track from start to finish, and I'll be breaking down every step as best as I can, so whether you're new or experienced, hopefully you can learn something new and elevate your track building game. So in this particular video, I'll be showing you how to go from absolutely nothing to a basic playable prototype using a couple Blender tricks. I find that being able to test just a basic empty layout with nothing on it is helpful to get the gist of how you want your track to play, and then once you have something that feels good, you can then flesh it out and make it beautiful. To do this, you will need a 3D modeling software. I highly recommend Blender because, first of all, it's free, and pretty much every other track creator out there uses it, so it's easy to troubleshoot and share knowledge with each other. I'll be using Blender for this tutorial, so if you're using something else like 3ds Max, it may be harder to follow along, but fundamentally a lot of things should carry over. You'll also need the Crash Team Editor program. This is a tool created by the Red Hot BR. It is the tool that makes everything possible, really. A link to this will be in the description. As of making this video, it is currently in beta version 0.0.26. There's a chance that some things may be outdated by the time you're watching, so be sure to check the latest release features on the GitHub page. We will also need the special ROM called the PS1 Track ROM that allows us to quickly test our levels from the editor. This can also be found on the Crash Team Editor GitHub page. Now this next one isn't necessarily required, but I will still highly recommend that you have a drawing or image editing software. This will be useful for any texture work you might want to do, or concept art, whichever you prefer. My weapons of choice are Clip Studio Paint and Sprite. Sprite especially I find is super nice for working with texture editing. Both of these are paid though, so if you want something free, something like GIMP or Krita should be fine. Okay, with that out of the way, let's hop on Blender. So, this is Blender. Now, quick disclaimer, this is not really a Blender tutorial. I'll be showing you hotkeys and how to do certain things that are relevant to CTR track making, but I highly recommend getting to grips with the very basics of how Blender works first, because it'll help get your brain accustomed to the 3D workflow and it'll help you work faster as well as think a bit more intuitively about 3D modeling. If you've never opened Blender before in your life, before watching this video, it may be a little harder to follow along, but hopefully this tutorial will sort of help nudge you in the right direction. Okay, so when you open Blender, you are greeted with these three objects: this camera, this cube, and this light. We don't want any of those, so I'm going to select them all with A, and I'm going to delete them with X. Goodbye. Now, the next part is importing a drawing or layout reference image, if you have one. So when I make tracks, I always make a top-down layout image of how I want the track to look. I find it's very useful to have like a sort of visual reference when modeling something, so I recommend you do the same because we will be making great use of it. Just remember to keep it simple, please. Please keep it simple. Okay, so I'm going to import my layout here. It's a short figure 8 shaped track with a few different types of terrain and a bit of varying elevation. I've also added a split path over here, which will be mostly just for tutorial purposes, but it should be pretty cool. Yeah, I went with like a winter themed level here because I feel that fits what I want to show in the tutorial, and I also just really like snow levels. So remember that your finished track may deviate from your initial drawing. That's fine. This isn't a 100% accurate blueprint. It's just a guideline. So don't be afraid to experiment or change things around as you're going. So, as you can see, this guy is tilted and not flat. We want it to be completely flat here. So I'm going to press Ctrl R. That will reset its rotation. And now I'm going to press S to scale, and I'm going to make it much larger. Now, a very useful thing in Blender is orthographic view. Orthographic view lets you view things dead on from an axis. So if you go up here, you can see we can look at the directions of the axes right now as I'm rotating the camera. Z is always up and down, and then X and Y are the other directions here. If I want to look from the top down, I can click the Z. If I want to look from the Y-axis, I can click this, and I can also press X for the X-axis. Very useful when modeling and making things accurate and working to references and stuff like that. A quicker way to navigate on orthographic view is by using Control middle mouse, although in my case I'm using Control Alt right click because it's just easier for me. My middle mouse button hurts my hand, so I avoid using it. Okay, so we've got a reference, and now we want to start adding a mesh. But before doing that, something very important that I should explain is that everything in a CTR track is built out of things called quadblocks or triblocks. Now, a quadblock looks a bit like this. I'm going to drag this over here. A quadblock is an object, so usually like a square-shaped object, which is made up of 4 square faces like this. Similarly, a triblock, quickly make a triblock here. A triblock is the same principle, except it is made up of 4 tries. Looks like the Zelda Triforce. If you look in the original models that Naughty Dog made for Crash Team Racing, you can do so with CTR Viewer, which is a tool that lets you view the original models and fly through them. If you go into wireframe mode, you'll notice that everything in the tracks, the roads, the walls, some scenic decoration stuff, is built out of quad blocks. Every quad block is adjacent to each other and connects to each other, and triblocks also work within them as well. You can connect quad blocks to triblocks and such, like this. Like they are all joined together. It's like a big jigsaw puzzle. That's one way to put it. But yeah, this is important. This is very important for your track to work. So keep that in mind. We will be making use of these later. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a technique for creating a road path using only one quad block. So we're going to start by doing Shift A, Mesh, and Plane. This creates a plane here. I'm going to go into Edit mode, make sure it's all selected, right click, Subdivide. And now we have a quad block. So how do we make this singular quad block cover the entire track? By using modifiers. So I'm going to add a modifier here. I'm going to go to Generate and Array. And what that will do is it will generate another duplicate of this quad block along any axis that I choose. At the moment it's going along X in positive, but we don't want that. So I'm going to put that to 0, and I'm going to put it in Y positive instead. And you can repeat this action by going up to count, and you can make the number higher. For now I'm just going to put it to 80. It's roughly probably the right amount, but you'll see that it's repeated the same quad block all the way over here in one big long line. I'm actually going to go over here to overlays, and I'm going to enable wireframe so we can see the wireframe mesh of the mesh as well. The next modifier we want to add is mirror, although it has not actually mirrored the object. That is because it's on the wrong axis, and it's also just positioned in a weird way. So I'm going to quickly go into orthographic view, G to grab, that lets you move stuff around. I'm going to make sure it's mirrored on the x-axis, and I'm just going to move it. There we go. So now, not only is this quad block being repeated infinitely along this line, it's also being reflected along this axis. And then that reflection is also being repeated infinitely along this line. So we're combining two modifiers. Now a quick way to sort of visualize that this is working is to add a texture. So I'm going to go here in materials. I'm going to give this a new material, just going to call it road. Go down here to base color, click image, and I'm going to go onto my road texture that I have already made. Go to UV editing, and I'm going to go here to texture so I can see my texture. Now when I make textures for quad blocks, I usually like to make different pieces of the road fit each face, which makes it very easy for moving pieces of like textures around to fit with the quad block. In this case, I have just one side of a road here. We've got the edge piece and then the middle piece. I've designed it in such a way that this can be reflected and it will create a normal looking road like so. You'll see that I have the finish line as well. I only use that once, the whole track, but I keep it as part of this texture just for efficiency and to save me needing to make an extra texture. So what I can do here is I can take these two faces, make sure they're selected in the UV screen as well. I'm going to press G. I'm going to move them down here. Now I need to snap it to the grid, so I'm going to hold Control. I'll ensure that it is perfectly aligned in place. So now we have an entire road. Doesn't have a finish line yet, but that's okay, we can add that later. And also, you'll see there's these little seams here because the texture interpolation is on linear. We want to put that to closest instead. There we go. Now, as you can see, it's just a one piece of road. We have repeated and reflected it to create a very long road here. So, how do we get our road to follow our path? Well, I'm going to go into layout mode here, layout tab. I've put the lighting to flat and texture, and we are going to add another object. Go here to curve and then path. Also, real quick, I'm actually going to scale our reference image using S, and then I'm using G to move it as well. Make it a bit like this. Typically, you want your roads to be 2 quad blocks wide. A lot of CTR tracks that Naughty Dog made are 2 quad blocks wide. Some of them are 3, like Coco Park, but I feel 2 is a nice basic length to go for. Basic width, sorry. If you go for 1, it might be too narrow, or the quads will just be too big, and it'll just look a bit clunky, a little bit odd, a bit too low poly, you know. But ultimately, it's up to you. It's your track, your rules. So we've got our path here. I'm going to select it with G. I'm going to move it just somewhere in the middle here. I'm going to press R to rotate and hold Control to snap it to degrees like that. Now we want to go back to our object, and we're going to add our third and final modifier. Going here to deform, curve, and we can now select our path. It's called NURBS path. And now, anything we do to this path, our track will follow it. Although, if it does this, If it moves along this here, that means that your path is the wrong way around. You can fix that by just rotating it like such. There we go. So now, when we press E to extrude, you can create another point. And now, anything we do, our path will follow. So, I'm going to basically draw along my layout here. I'm not going to worry about this split path section. We'll come to that later because it requires using some different stuff that I want to show in the tutorial. So we'll leave that for now. Just going to keep extruding, making sure that my road path is in the middle here. If you run out of space, you can just go into your counts, just add more, and select your curve again. If you're having trouble selecting your curve, you can just press G, raise it up a little bit. It shouldn't affect your road path, so don't worry about that. Go back to orthographic view, and we'll continue finishing this off here. We'll add just a couple more. Come on. Ah, I must have, no, okay. I just wasn't clicking it. Okay. There we go. Okay, so with just one quad block, we have used modifiers to turn that quad block into a road that follows a path. Now, as it is, this is a track, however, it's completely flat. These two parts overlap each other and that's going to cause a problem. So we want to give this track some vertical gameplay. CTR is known for its vertical gameplay. A lot of what makes CTR fun is the jumps, the landing boosts, and the varied like inclines, downhills, uphills, and all the various speed tech that you can like do with all of that. If your track is just completely flat like this, you're not going to be able to really get much out of it. It's going to be very boring and just kind of plain. So we're going to try and add some spice to this layout here. And thankfully, we can do all of that with the same path. So these points, we've been moving them just on one axis to draw the path, but we can also move them up and down, like so. And that will give our track some inclines. So looking at our layout, we want this section of the track to be raised a bit like this, because I want this to go underneath to be sort of like a tunnel or a bridge, and I want this part to also be downhill, which means I want this part to be even higher. Now if you're doing this, you might notice that when raising your points using G and Z, it might cause your track to twist like this, which is not what we want. Thankfully there is a fix. If you click this button here, the little green curve called data, we can change the twist method to Z up, and that'll fix it. So now we can move any of these and it won't mess with the twistiness of our track. So I'll just quickly tweak these to a point that I'm happy with. Okay, another thing I want to show you is if you want to add a point between 2 points for more precision, what you can do is select 2 points with shift click and press right click and subdivide. That will create another point in between, which lets you do things like this. If you want to add like a little bump, a little hump in the road, you can do it like that. And I can move them a little closer together like such if I want the hump to be pretty small. If you want a sharper curve, what you can do is subdivide again and then just tweak accordingly. There we go. Although I actually don't want this hump to be here, I'm going to move it a bit further up over here. There we go. In fact, yeah, I'm going to move it up here. You can also do the opposite and remove points that are between 2 points by pressing Ctrl X. That will dissolve them, which is pretty handy. Move this hump a little more over here. If you need to add more, you can do that, like so. Okay. I'm fairly happy with how the inclinations are on this track. It goes up and then down and repeats around. That's pretty good. So, not only can you change the elevation of your points, but you can also change the width of parts of your track. So if you select, I'm going to select the points around this turn here because on my layout I want this part of the track to be wide. What you can do is if you go to this area up here, there's a little arrow that you click. Go to mean radius and drag that up a little bit. You'll see that you can now change the thickness of just the selected points, which is very helpful. So I'm going to move these a little bit. I'm going to tweak these so the thickness lines up with my drawing. Like that. I'm going to add a point here just to taper that a little quicker. There we go. I recommend doing this because I think adding varying widths of road just adds a little more character and more charm, and it gives your track a bit more of an organic feel. It's not a necessary thing to do, you don't have to do this, but if you want to give your track just a little more character, it doesn't hurt to add a little bit of variance here and there. I want this part to be a little bit thinner, just a little bit. Make this curve, this turn a little bit wider. Yeah, it wants to look wider here. This is why having a layout drawing is just super helpful, by the way, because you can see what you want to do. You can line it up exactly to how you drew it out to. Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. But there is one more trick that you can do. Not only can you raise the elevation and change the the thickness of your roads, but you can also tilt your roads. And you might notice that there is a mean tilt here. You can also activate this with Ctrl-T on your selected points, and then you can now tilt parts of your track. This is really nice for making banked turns. I generally like to bank all of my turns, even if it's just by a tiny little bit. It also just adds a bit of variance, a bit of character, and a bit of organicness to your track. So I'm going to bank this. Typically you want to avoid banking too much, because if you have a turn like this, it's a little crazy. It can work, and like you can do it if you want, but just note that it might be a little bit janky, and I don't know. But if you can make it work, go for it. There is no wrong way to make a track. There's just certain things work better for CTR than others, but at the end of the day you can make whatever you want. You don't have to make a track that looks like this, but I hope that these techniques can be applied to whatever you're making as well. So feel free to just play around and experiment, try stuff. It's the best way to learn. Alright, we now have a bit of banking, a bit of twisty and turns and stuff like that. Our track is looking a lot more alive. It's got a lot more character. Cool. One more thing I want to show, and this isn't a necessary thing to do, but it's something that I think you should know because it's really fucking cool. You'll remember that the road is made up of just this one quad block here. This one quad block is carrying this entire road. So what happens if we add to this quad block? For example, if I were to extrude this edge with E, and then X to stick it to the X axis, I'll extrude it a little bit, and then I will press Shift R to repeat that same action. That will make a second quad block here. Now, as you can see, it has also taken this extruded part and carried it along the entire track. That is really cool. If you really wanted, you could take this, you could raise it up a little bit, do this. You could even take your road, have it dip in ever so slightly. Have your road dip in ever so slightly like this. And then it will apply those changes across the entire thing. So we have this off-road part that is slightly raised up. Just look how much that changes the track. Like, it's so cool. It'll just save you loads of time. Another thing that I thought I should mention is you can take this even further. You could even add walls, you can add decorations, and you can use all of this and still apply it to that same single piece of track that then gets flipped and cloned, and you can turn that into an entire track if you really wanted. And if you did want to make this an off-road part of your track, you will need to give it its own material, because at the moment it's still road. What you want to do is we want to click new material, we'll call it off-road, and I'm going to give that its own texture, which I already have prepared. This is just a snow texture here. If we go into UV editing mode, you'll see that it still has the road texture. What we can do is go into off-road, assign, and it will assign whatever selected texture you have to whatever faces you have selected here on your mesh. So now all of these have the off-road texture. But the UVs are all fucked up. You can fix this by selecting all of your faces, pressing U, and clicking reset. So now we have our road and we have our off-road, and all of it very nicely follows along our path, featuring twists, turns, and changes in elevation. So we want to separate all of our quad blocks into individual objects. Otherwise, the Crash Team Editor program won't recognize it. We want to make sure that our off-road is also separate. You can do that by pressing Y. And what that will do is it will separate this from this, as if it was unmerged. So now that we have our road, we want to make sure we have a backup of this, just in case we want to go back to it if we make a mistake after applying all of our modifiers. So I'm going to select the curve and the road here, and I'm going to press M, new collection, and call it road. And now we have a road here. I'm going to select all of these. Shift D to duplicate. Press M again. I'm going to call it backup. Now we have a duplicate of those in its own collection that we can access whenever we need it. But now it's time to apply the modifiers. So, modifiers tab. We're going to apply our array. Make sure merge is off. We're going to apply our mirror. Make sure merge is off. We're going to apply our curve as well. That means we can delete our curve object, and now the object is set in stone. However, there will be a few problems that we might need to fix. For example, we have a quad block problem here. So we could delete these. And we're going to try and join these two together. What you can do is you can select your edge with G, your vert with G. Make sure that you have your snapping set to vertex, which means when you hold Control, it will snap your selection to any vertex that you're hovering over. So we can do that with all of these, because it's very important in custom tracks, CTR, for your edges and verts to be connected and touching each other. If there is any kind of little gap between them, it will be noticeable, which isn't always a bad thing, but it can break the immersion a little bit. So if you don't want that, just try and keep everything touching completely. Okay, I'm using G and Y here to just move these along the y-axis and just kind of evenly spread them out. Like that. And there we go. And now that we have all of our pieces separated, what I can do is I can finally add our finish line, which I will do by doing this. Remember holding Control to snap to the grid. Well, in our case, well, it's on increment, but you want it to be on grid usually. That's usually best to have it. There we go. Now this is a problem here. This finish line is mirrored, and we don't want that. Thankfully, that can also be fixed. If you select the two faces on the opposite side, on the mirrored side, you can fix this in multiple different ways. One way is to do s, y, minus 1. That basically flips this around on the y-axis. And there you go. What I use personally is I use a tool called UV Toolkit. It's a really good add-on for editing UVs. If I can find a version, I will put a link in the description, but last time I checked it wasn't available, so you might need to find something else like UV Squares, or any other kind of UV editing tool. I think this one's built into Blender, UV editing. You can mirror UVs on that as well. Yeah, use whatever you have. Yeah, there you go. We want to save. Saving is very important, so we're going to save that, this tutorial. There is another problem here. This curve is very, like, it's pinched itself in like this, and that's not very good. So this is where we can use Triblocks. So I'm going to go into layout here. I'm going to try and fix this mess right here. So let's locate where our quad blocks are. Here we are. Ooh, that is pretty messy. Now this is a big mess, but you will run into this occasionally if you are making paths. So let's figure out how to fix this bad boy. Ooh. Might be worth... Let's start by moving these out a little bit. I'm going to try and untangle this mess. One by one. Okay, there we go. There's no overlapping anymore, but we do not want we do not want our path to look like this. So I want to turn these 3 quad blocks into triblocks to help reduce the number of verts on this edge here. We're going to reduce it from, how many is this? Like 7 to just 1. So we'll do one at a time. So I'm going to select this quad block here. I'm going to press Shift H, and we're going to select these 3 here. M, merge at center. I'm going to select this middle one here. Control X to dissolve. Now I'm going to select 2 points. I'm going to use J to join them together with an edge. Join them together with an edge. You can undo the hiding with Alt H. Yeah, I should probably explain that. So Shift H will hide everything except the selection. Just regular H will hide the selection. And then Alt H will unhide everything that is currently hidden. So next one, we're going to select this one. Shift H. This time I'm going to merge them at the last selected one here. At last. Same deal here. Join these together. Alt H, unhide. Now this one. Well, that's fine. We can merge these together at last as well. I'll separate you actually. Shift H. Join these together. Okay. We're getting there. We're getting there. Now I'm going to use my vertex snap to join these all together, like so. I'm going to try and fix this curve, and then spread our quad blocks out evenly. This is why Triblocks are very useful. It's not perfect, but it works. I mean, we could take this a step further. We don't have to, but we could turn this into a triblock as well. And then we can actually remove this middle triblock entirely. So now we can join all of these together like this. Reduces the amount of clutter, keeps our quads homogeneous and nice. There we go. I'd say it's generally good practice to keep your quads clean like this, because messy quads can cause problems, especially in gameplay. If you drive into a section with messy quads, it could cause a bit of jank. We don't like jank. Well, sometimes we like jank, but usually you want to avoid it. Okay. Yeah. It's not perfect, but it's definitely much cleaner than what it was. You. Now this is a bit of an awkward one. I would love to turn these four into a triblock, but I cannot, because if I use L, this triblock sits between two quad blocks, which means I'm going to have to turn this into a triblock instead. Whoops. Yep. Alt H, join it together. Reminder that I'm working in X-ray view for this. It allows me to select my verts without, it allows me to select multiple verts at once, which is very helpful for working with meshes that have separated pieces like this. Okay. Yeah, that's a little better. A little cleaner. Okay. Let's make sure there's no more. Aha! There's some here as well. And also a reminder, you don't have to do off-road with your road, because the wider you make your quad block, the more problems you have with turns like this. But it's a good thing to practice fixing your messy mesh like this. You will be doing a lot of it, just warning you. Okay, so this one, turn into a triblock. You know what? We're going to do the same thing. We're going to turn this one to a triblock instead. Whoops. J, J, J. It might, well, not might, but it will mess up your UVs, but we'll fix those later. So don't worry about that. You can get rid of this quad block. Triblock, sorry. Excuse me, pressing the wrong buttons. There we go. Okay. Yeah, it's a little messy, but it's workable. This is fine. Okay, let's fix this UV real quick. Yeah. There we go. Okay, lovely. Are there any more turns? I think we are good. Yeah, I think we're good. And that is that's a demonstration of how Triblocks can save your mesh. Can keep your quads nice and evenly spaced. And yeah, Triblocks are very good with turns. Very helpful with turns. Yeah, cool. So this is our track. I think we're now ready to separate this into objects, to individual objects. But because we have two materials, we don't want to have two materials in one object like this. If I were to select all of this now and press P, separate by loose parts, yes, I will have separated all of these into their own object. However, all of them will have both materials, which is not what we want. So I'm going to undo that. Go back to our singular object here. Instead of separating by loose parts, we're going to click separate by material. What that does is we now have a road object and an off-road object. And I'm going to name these first. So I'm going to press F2 with my object selected. I'm going to call it road. Now I'm going to select this one, F2, off-road. And then I'm also going to give this its own collection. I'd say it's good practice to have every piece of your track that has a different material in its own collection. Trust me, it will save you later. Because you will be working with so many different individual objects. It's very helpful to be able to select all of a specific type at once. That's where collections come in. Very helpful. Okay. Now that we have these separated, we can safely select all of this. Loose parts. And loose parts. Let's go back onto layout. See it a little better. And now we have our road pieces and our off-road pieces, all individual objects. This also includes our Triblocks that we use to fix the messy turns. Wonderful. Last thing before we move on to the editor. Always check your face orientation. If you go here into your overlays, viewport overlays, check face orientation, and it will turn your entire mesh either blue or red. If you want your faces that are facing up and that are visible to be blue, so anything that you're driving on or that you will be colliding with needs to be blue. Anything that's red, because it's the back face, it will not be visible and you can drive through it. So that's something important to keep in mind. So everything is blue here. That means we're good. We can turn that off. Before we export, we need to check our Vertex paint. Let's click Attribute. If you go here to Attribute, it will show you your Vertex paint. Now, by default in Blender, Vertex paint is white. However, if we use this white Vertex paint in our level, when we are viewing it in game, it will make our texture look all white and washed out. That is because the default color that we want for our game is grey. This middle grey right here. Value of 0.5. Now you can use Ctrl X to fill in an object. However, when your objects are separated like this, you can't just select them all and then Ctrl X. You have to join them all together again, which you can do with Ctrl J. And uh-oh, what happened here? No, that's fine actually. Yeah. Then we can just separate by material, off-road, road, off-road, road. See how it's very easy to take steps back to change stuff without messing up your quad blocks too much. It's very helpful. So we want to do loose parts and then loose parts again. And now we are ready to export. So file, export, wavefront OBJ. This is an old test file, so I'm going to delete that for now. And we're just going to make a new one. Make sure colors is selected. This will apply your Vertex paint, which is the grey that we added just now. And everything else you can leave as it is. It's completely fine. There we go. Export. And now, this is where we go into the Crash Team Editor program. So, open it up. And we want to go to File, Open, and then click our tutorial object and open that up. If everything is fine, you should see this. You will see a renderer window, which you can use WASD and arrow keys to navigate. Very nice. However, if you have a problem with one of your quad blocks or multiple, it will not work. So for example, I'm going to separate this to give invalid quad blocks. If I were to export and import a level into the editor that has an invalid quad block, you'll see that the editor will detect them and tell you which ones they are. So if you get this error message, it's because something in your level is incorrect quad block format. And thankfully it tells you which ones they are, so it should be easy to fix. If you have a situation like this where you've accidentally separated a quad block in half, you can select them both, Ctrl J to join them, and then edit mode, select all the faces, merge by distance. What this does is makes all vertices that are unwelded from each other in this selection re-welded. It will join them together again, which means this is now a full object. Okay, so we'll export and we'll re-import back to how it looked earlier. So our level has two materials. This is the material tab. You can change the properties and parameters of different materials in your project. So by default in Crash Team Editor, everything is set to just a typical drivable road, which for our road is perfectly fine. Off-road, however, we do not want to be drivable like our main road. We want it to slow us down. Thankfully, there is a terrain called snow, which will slow us down, and it will also slide us around a little bit. It has less traction than typical like dirt or grass off-road. So we want to apply that, and we should be good. We have road and off-road programmed into our level. I'm not going to get into checkpoints or anything else just yet, because this is just a test prototype. We will go more into detail. We'll add ice, we'll add turbo pads, we'll add walls and all sorts of other stuff later on. But for the sake of getting a quick prototype, we can work with this. So what we want to do is save our presets. This will make sure that any changes we've made to the properties of the level, such as the material, it will keep a note of those. So then if we were to re-import a newer version of our object, it will bring those saved presets back into the Crash Team Editor software. Hopefully that makes sense. So after that, you want to go File, Save, and we will just save it in the tutorial track folder here. And now we're ready to test. So, if you have the PS1 track ROM, open that up. Make sure it's the one that's in the GitHub, otherwise this will not work. Now you probably can't hear any audio, but that's fine. I might be able to fix that. No, I think yeah. Okay, you can hear audio. Brilliant. So, this is the special track ROM. It will only have time trial, because it is for testing only. Now, what we can do in Crash Team Editor is, actually let me turn this down a little bit. What we can do in Crash Team Editor is we can tell the game to load in our level file that we just made, because when we save our project, it will create a where is this? There it is. It'll create two files. It'll create a .lev, which is the level file, and it will create a .vrm, which is a VRAM texture file that loads in the textures basically. If everything is good, you should see both of these in our hot reload tab, which is here. If the VRM path doesn't show, that means that there is a problem with your textures. You might want to look at that. But I will get more into textures later, so don't worry. So, make sure your game is open, and when you go into the hot reload tab, click hot reload. And now, we go into time trial. This is our level. But uh-oh. It's very, very small. So, that's not very good. However, we can fix that, no problem. We also need to fix this spawn point. This isn't quite right. So let's do that. So hop back into Blender and let's fix the scaling here. So I'm going to make sure I'm in object mode. I'm going to press A to select all, and then I'm going to press S to scale. Now, this might take a bit of trial and error, but you'll get a feel for it over time. I'm also going to make sure that my spawn point is right on the origin here. Where this red and green line intersect, that is where your player will spawn by default. You can also rotate it so its finish line is straight. There we go. Okay, should be good. We're gonna scale it a little bit more. There we go. I'm gonna quickly check which direction was I facing. So I was facing to the right of where I want it to be facing. So what we can do is rotate the track. I'll press R and then I'm going to press 90 degrees. So R 90. So now when we spawn in, we should be facing along the x-axis here. There we go. This might not be perfect, but let's give it a try. Make sure you save, export, OBJ. Now because I have my preset saved, I can just load in another object, no problem, and it will remember them, as you can see here. So we're going to save again, hot reload, and you cannot hot reload if your game is paused, so make sure that your game is unpaused before you do any hot reloading. Then we can open again, and hopefully, if all is good, there we go. So now we are facing the right direction. Our scale seems pretty good. It might still be a little bit too small, but look at this. We can now drive along the level we just made. And the off-road is slowing us down. Yeah, so there you have it. This is a fully working prototype level. Now, it's still missing some stuff, obviously, but hopefully this tutorial was helpful and that you're able to apply this knowledge into your next project. In the following parts of this series, we will be expanding upon this and really fleshing out this track into something awesome. And remember that I don't claim to be an expert on Blender or doing any of this stuff, so there's probably many other alternate solutions to making tracks like this, so I recommend checking out other tutorials and just keep learning, and you'll be able to develop a style that works well for you. Alright, well, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya!